Let's take a quick look at the Indo-Gangetic Plain. The region between the Himalayas and the Vahanda Mountains lies in the Indo-Gangetic Plains, as you can see by the arrow. On one side, you've got the Himalayas to the north, and below that, you've got some of the other mountain ranges, not very tall mountain ranges relatively, but you do have this valley here of the Indo-Gangetic Plain. This map shows the different winds that push up into India on all sides during the monsoons. These winds would bring with it rain and wind, obviously. The wind would push the storms from the ocean into the subcontinent, causing it to get hammered with rain. And this happens unexpected times for unexpected durations of time. Sometimes they would be continuing on for days and weeks, sometimes multiple weeks, sometimes only for a couple minutes. So very unpredictable to the extent of people having to live there. Very difficult to live there sometimes. On the northwestern coast of India is where we're going to actually focus on early civilizations along the Indus. Here's what we know and where these cities actually existed. These four major cities of ancient times. So civilizations emerge on the Indus. Now we're getting into some of the history. And you thought that you knew all about history? Well, not in this case. Especially not in the case of the people that lived along the Indus. Historians, as we mentioned earlier, have yet to decipher their system of writing. It is still unclear when civilization began in these areas, but best evidence shows that people were using domesticated goats and sheep around 7000 BC. So that's about 9,000 years ago. So we have some evidence based on carbon dating and other archaeological finds that kind of place this as a very, very old civilization. The civilization that lived along the Indus Valley is sometimes called the Harrapan civilization because the first finds from archaeologists took place in an area known as the Harappa. What made this civilization unique, though, compared to others that we've discussed, is their city planning. That was certainly one of their more remarkable achievements. Instead of just plopping down buildings in any old place, like the Egyptians did, or the people in Mesopotamia, the people here actually laid out their buildings in a type of grid system, a lot like Milwaukee, actually like city blocks. Okay, and it was obviously a well-designed city. One of the benefits of using this grid system that they used was that the engineers of the city were able to create an advanced plumbing system. It was so good, their plumbing system, that it was actually rivaled that of the 1800s. So they had this system of getting waste out of their town. That obviously being a very important thing to get these human waste and animal waste out of town. The fact that some sort of specifically designed system of buildings and plumbing showed that the Indus people had a strong central government, that this was a planned city, that they had reasons for what they were doing, and that their strong government shows that people were willing and able to follow that government. This is what we're talking about when we see a grid system. From this aerial view, you can get an idea on how the structures were built, and they were kind of built in regions of squares, okay? All leaving primarily a main road down the center here available for the transportation of goods and people and animals, as well as for their plumbing system. So a lot of these regions will see similar types of designs when it comes to the layout of their city. Square buildings, square blocks, little alleyways, but all focusing along one major central road, which is where a lot of their plumbing existed. Here we kind of see an artist's rendition of how the plumbing system might have looked back in the day. Basically, it's a simple ditch dug throughout the town down this main corridor that would have some sort of running water, probably connected to a river, that would flush out the waste of the town. This system shows that people realized the need to remove waste from the city in order to prevent disease and other types of unwanted problems like rats and other animals, mosquitoes, things like that. If you can get the garbage and the waste out of town, it's better for everybody. Looking at the artifacts that have been found and how the city is laid out, the separation of how the houses were designed suggests that there's not much of a division when it comes to social classes. There really wasn't any social classes that we can see. The fact that they found a lot of artifacts showing that the rich people probably lived right next door to some poor people. So there's not a lot of differences between the rich and the poor. Some of those artifacts included toys, clay pots, and they suggest that the city as a whole was pretty prosperous. You're typically not going to have a lot of toys and these extra luxuries if your city can't afford it. So these luxuries prove that the city was probably pretty prosperous. Since they didn't find any real quantities of warfare items like swords and daggers, that suggests that any type of conflict was probably limited. Other artifacts discovered in the Harrapan seems to show that animals were also very important to their society, based upon the carvings and the drawings that they left on their pottery, as well as in their writings that we have seen. There is some evidence to suggest that the Harrapan did have some sort of a theocracy type of government, that their way of life was based primarily on their religion. You'll see that there are temples, religious temples that seem to be built up throughout the town. So it kind of shows that their government did have some sort of a religion, that the artifacts that they've collected show that this religion was very part to their society and their success. What I think is even more interesting, that some of the stuff that's been found from these artifacts can be linked to modern Hindu cultures. So a lot of these artifacts we see from 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 years ago are similar to the artifacts, or similar to the things that the Hindu religion uses today in its religious practices. Here are a few pieces of those artifacts that have been found. These articles depict symbols of showing the domestication of animals, as well as what could be considered possibly religious symboling as well. So, evidence found in the 1970s suggests that there's a shift from the tectonic plates that may have caused earthquakes, flooding, and other issues to have caused the Indus River to change course. After the earthquakes, some cities survived, but disaster shows that the city's food supplies were certainly affected. Later on, though, a group of people called the Aryans would eventually come in and sweep control of the area and take over. And there we have it, the end of our lecture for today on the introduction to the Indus Valley and the ancient Indian culture. As I mentioned before, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know, and we'll get that taken care of right away. And I look forward to you checking with our next lecture, which we will talk specifically about the Hindu religion, and as well as the Buddhist faith as well. So, have a great day, and continue to be awesome. See you later.